It means there's no card network. And what does that mean? It means there's no interchange. It means there's something called ACH instead. That's a network that would transmit that payment, but it carries a much lower fee for the merchants. It's cheaper.
Hey gang, it's Tuesday, March 15th. David and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, an e-marketer podcast made possible by Mountain. I'm Marcus, and today I'm joined by one of our principal analysts on the payments and commerce team. It's David Morris.
Hey, great to be here, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Hello, sir. Of course, an absolute pleasure. Thanks for hanging out. Today's fact: where in the world is the largest tree? The world. Do you know, David?
Oh, Northern California.
Wow.
Yeah, Sequoia.
Oh my goodness, he's seen my notes. How did you know?
I don't know. I'm glued to Wikipedia. I like to. I'm in market research, Marcus. You know, I can't.
That's fair.
Can't help
That's
it.
fair.
Yeah,
I should have known. Well, the world's largest tree, is the Hyperion, which is a coastal redwood sequoia located in the heart of Redwood National Park in California. It's called the General Sherman. It's got a name, apparently. And it sits at 275 feet tall. So for context, because anything after 7 foot, which is like the tallest basketball player, well, I guess the tallest one I've seen is like 7'4", 7'5", Yao Ming. But after that, who knows what's 8 feet? What does that mean? I don't know. 275 feet. Big Ben in London, if you've been to London / seen a picture of Big Ben, that's just a little bit taller than this tree. That's about 300 feet. So this is 275 to Big Ben's 300. So this tree is nearly as tall as Big Ben, which makes no sense. And which is what's even more insane is the tree has a 36-foot diameter at its base.
Oh my God. Yeah, and they're among the oldest living things on Earth as well. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. That one I don't know, but they're really old.
Yeah. Well, you can't even get close to this one. It's they're kind of trying to preserve it so much that you can only stand. It's kind of like going to see the Mona Lisa. You can only see it from a distance, but you don't have to be too close to be able to see this enormous tree. I did not think this was real until you just said that you knew exactly where this thing was. It sounds make-believe. I can't believe a tree is that tall.
No, it's insane. I mean, I've been around a long time too, longer than I'll ever be here.
Yeah, same. It's a miracle I got into the age that I'm at, to be perfectly honest, and that I got past my mid-20s. Anyway, today's real topic, Amazon and payments. So, David, today we're talking about Amazon and payments, what they're doing in payments, how they're influencing payments. And then we've got a couple of other news stories for you towards the end of the show, as per usual. But we'll start with some pretty big news, some pretty big developments with regards to Amazon and payments. We're going to start with something called interchange fees, which a lot of people, myself included, until I started doing research for this show, a lot of people might be like, what the hell are they? Why is this important? So, David, tell us what's going on with Amazon and interchange fees and why it matters.
Yeah, there's, having said that some people may not know what interchange fees are, I think the average consumer definitely does not, which plays in implicitly to some of this going on with Amazon. So if people don't know, I mean, Amazon stepped out last year, began surcharging some of the Visa credit cards internationally. Late last year, it said it would stop accepting Visa credit cards in the UK, a drastic step, meant, of course, to be able to get attention, public attention, and also the attention of Visa. And we're here today because in February, Visa and Amazon shook hands and put this disagreement aside. Mm-hmm. But this is all about, it's a negotiation between a merchant and a card payment network that actually doesn't earn funds or money directly from interchange, but does set the rates on behalf of the banks that it partners with. And if you think about anybody going to a store and using a card, if you want to make a purchase, let's call it a $100 purchase, 2.5% of that, and that's just roughly of that purchase amount, gets kicked back from the merchant to those entities that are responsible for enabling that card payment. And there are a lot of entities. Visa's just one. Mm-hmm. And if you boil down that percentage, 2.5%, let's say about 2% of that is a fee that's called interchange. It gets the most attention because it's the largest. And this is the fee that gets kicked back to the card issuers, the banks that issue the cards in the first place.
Okay.
And it's a point of negotiation because if you take a look at it from a merchant perspective and you're in a vacuum, and I think that's an important point, you're looking at $2.50 coming out of every $100 that comes through the door. And if you're just looking at that in a vacuum, that sounds like a lot of money that you have to fork over for taking this card payment. And something like cash, there is no fee. You come in, you pay $100, there's no fee for that. What that overlooks is the fact that the card networks, the issuers, all of these other payment players that are a part of enabling that transaction are bringing value to this equation, right? They're delivering customers. Visa is delivering millions and millions and millions of Visa branded card holders to merchants across the globe. That's good for merchants for obvious reasons. It's delivering specific customers to certain merchants. If you have a $450, $550, let's say a Sapphire Reserve card, that's a Visa card. You're a big spender and certain merchants want that. So you're delivering specific customers. But as importantly, or even more importantly, you're providing the means to be able to accept this payment and all of the costs and the infrastructure that goes into that. And that can be forgotten. Merchants know that there's a balance here, and Visa and its competitors, Mastercard, know this too, that it's about being able to strike a balance, the value that a network and the issuers are being able to provide for that merchant.
So it sounds like Amazon basically said, you're charging us too much to pay you guys per purchase, and so we're going to not accept Visa anymore. Visa and Amazon got in a room, hashed it out, and figured things out. I guess Amazon thought that they would be able to kind of influence or force the hand of Visa, because there's a really good article written by Will Page, who works here at Insider Intelligence, who is basically saying back in February when this got settled, that Amazon accounts for nearly 13% of global e-commerce sales. So it's got the heft to try to pressure Visa into inking a more accommodating fee structure. But it seems like when it was all said and done, Visa didn't actually... Did they change? Did they give anything at all? Did they give any ground?
Well, I think to your point, you're looking at the largest e-commerce player in the world, using its size and breadth to its advantage. Tons of card payment volume there. That's what that's all about. It's not just that it's 13% of e-commerce, but how much of that goes on Visa rails? Billions of dollars. I think it's worth pointing out that this kind of thing happens all the time, though. These negotiations happen all the time.
Right.
The reason that it's special is because it is Amazon, that there is so much volume at stake. And I would be certain, although I shouldn't say certain, that there would have been negotiations that took place at some point in the past. Amazon didn't get what it wanted. It took a more public stance, and that there was some kind of negotiation reached.
Okay.
In order to lower those fees just a bit.
Okay. And so you said that you were talking to me before the show about how this relates to something called open banking. What is open banking and why is it relevant to this conversation?
Yeah, I think that's really what this story is about. Amazon certainly wants better rates on the fees that it charges, but we're approaching a time of significant change in merchant payment choice. Open banking, an oversimplified way for our purposes, is account-to-account payments. It allows a customer to directly connect to a bank at checkout and pay the merchant directly. So what does that mean? It means there's no card network. And what does that mean? It means there's no interchange. It means there's something called ACH instead. That's a network that would transmit that payment, but it carries a much lower fee for the merchants. It's cheaper. And it's an extraordinary threat, potentially, for incumbent card payment networks. I think if both Visa and Mastercard have already thought ahead about how to capture this opportunity. There's one thing I've learned about Visa and Mastercard is that you never, ever underestimate their ability to adapt and grow as they have over this 10 to 15 year period where at many different points somebody has said, well, they're going to be disintermediated from this, or they're going to be put out to pasture for that, and it never happens. And they're doing this strategically. I think that they chose the UK because open banking is already taking off there. And it's a matter of kind of poking the bear a little bit and seeing what can happen and setting the stage for the possibility that they would actually integrate open banking into their own payment options.
Right. Let's talk about another way that Amazon is working on or getting involved with changing the game in payments, it could be said. So talking about autonomous checkout. So here you've got Just Walk Out technology. That's the technology that they have in their started in the Amazon Go stores, now in Amazon Fresh stores, and also in their Whole Foods store as well. So they're retrofitting this technology into their Whole Foods stores. The first one they just put this technology in recently. And this is where you go in, you scan your phone, you scan the Amazon app, and it lets you into the store. You pick up what you want off the shelves because of sensors and cameras. It can tell what you've picked up, and then it charges your credit card that's linked to the app, and you just walk out of the store. You don't have to go to a checkout. So that's the technology that Amazon's rolled out, Just Walk Out technology. And then also Amazon One, their palm payments, where you can go up and you can just scan your palm and it charges your credit card that way. David, what are some of your thoughts on this technology? And is this something that just Amazon's doing? Is this the way of retail payments at large? Is this going to be how every retailer eventually is going to have to allow customers to check out?
I think that Amazon's decision to enable this technology in a Whole Foods, which it has done in DC, indicates that they are moving from experimentation to a more full-scale implementation. There's been a lot of press about the fact that they're shutting down some of the Amazon-branded stores. I actually think that is at least partially because they're ready to take some of this technology to the next level, and they're clearly doing that with Just Walk Out and Amazon One, which is live at this DC Whole Foods. It's much, much harder to be able to pull something off like this in a store with 40,000 square feet than it is with a convenience store.
Right.
It's very important because, you're looking at ultimately no-click shopping. Just Walk Out and Amazon One both provide a no-click shopping experience. That's a holy grail of retail, being able to reduce payment friction, ensuring that your card isn't abandoned. And the payment process has a lot to do with that. And if you're taking it out entirely, which is what this does, I think you're looking at a conversion opportunity. What you're also looking at is a treasure trove of data. I mean, if you walk into the store, Marcus, and you're paying, but you're also being watched, your behavior is being assessed. And what you have for the first time is the ability to blend behavioral information about choices or putting things back and so forth, along with the payment. It's extraordinary.
How people moved around the store.
Yeah. And that's, I think, where, I think Amazon is positioning itself, because this is still very nascent. I mean, there's less than 100 stores that have it, but it is reaching the capacity for scale. They're licensing the technology already, and that allows them to make a fortune off of ultimately an operating system that they intend to control, and doing so much with the data.
Right. Well, you talked about doing so much with the data. I mean, how concerning is all of this when it comes to privacy issues?
Well, there have definitely been, I would call it a minor outcry about privacy issues. Maybe I am a pessimist, but I don't see privacy in the U.S. being something that's going to hold these technologies back for very long. I think that you have things like explicit consent, limitations on use. And I think in the U.S., consumers, in my view, have already proven that they just don't care. When they interact online, they're already transacting and either ignorant to the data that they're giving up, or understanding that they're giving up that data in return for something. And if you go back and think about this, I mean, I would ask you, Marcus, what do you think about being able to go into a store and all you have to do is wave your palm? You don't even need your wallet. And you can walk in and you walk out and there is no line. And that's easy and as convenient as can be. It's a consumer's dream. How can you say no?
Exactly. Well, convenience matters more than anything. I think we're learning that more and more, particularly in the pandemic. Convenience is king. And I'm just looking at images of the store as well, the Amazon Fresh store that has this technology in it. And we're going to be speaking to Andrew Lipsman, retail principal analyst, who went down to the Amazon Fresh store. We're talking to him on tomorrow's episode about his experience of going down there. So check that episode out. But I'm looking at pictures of the store, and you wouldn't know that there are hundreds of cameras watching you. So I think to your point, like a lot of people won't know. They're just going to think that this is a cool way for them to skip queues, skip lines, which people hate. And that's going to be enough for folks. David, so I want to quickly talk to you just to wrap up the lead story here about how Amazon is using payments to expand its user base.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that people may not know about Amazon, is how well they've been able to leverage payments choice to create as inclusive a shopper environment as possible. They want to be all things to all people from a commerce perspective, but you can go to Amazon and pick among almost any card you want. The only card they don't have in the US anyway is a debit card. You can convert your cash at retail outlets and translate that cash into prepaid accounts. You've got the ability, if you're an EBT card recipient, to be able to actually pay directly now on Amazon. Those two last points, I think, are really important from an inclusion standpoint. But you're ultimately looking at Amazon being able to build its base out through payment choice into formerly Walmart territory and own everyone's wallet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was a point where there were a couple of retailers or restaurant chains who were saying we're completely cashless now. And it seemed like they got a bit of pushback on that because you're starting to exclude certain groups of the population who typically only use cash, or even people who do use cards, but maybe they didn't have cards on them and only had cash in the moment. I remember one restaurant chain I went into and the person in front of me, they only had cash, they didn't have a card. So they asked me if they could give me cash and I could pay for their meal. And it must have been, so kind of like embarrassing for them. I've definitely been in that situation before when I've only had cash. So it doesn't seem like a good strategy to say, it sounds cool to say, hey, we're completely cashless. And it's probably good in the time of a pandemic. But ultimately, the world just isn't ready to get rid of cash entirely. Is that fair to say?
No, I think you...
Oh, sorry. Particularly the US, I should say, not the world at large.
I think you make some great points there. Cash is beaten down, but certainly not defeated.
Yep.
And it is very important for lower value transactions, although electronic payments have made a lot of inroads there. And it's also more likely to be used by lower income folks who might be disenfranchised from traditional banking. That's something that is still true. Actually, having mentioned open banking, there's a whole nother podcast we could talk about how that may actually be able to solve that inclusion riddle for people who have historically been kept out of traditional banking channels. But we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, we might have to circle back to that topic. That's fascinating. Well, that's all we've got time for the lead. It's time now for the halftime report. So, David, we talked about a lot. If I could grab one takeaway from you from the first half.
I would really watch how quickly Amazon starts to roll out the technology from a licensing perspective. Clearly, there's going to be major retailers that compete directly with Amazon that they won't want anything to do with this. But there's a lot of retailers that benefit from working with Amazon. And you're also looking at something that's international in scope. So I would see this moving quickly into large store formats by the end of the year.
Really quickly on that, do we know whether Amazon, if I was a retailer and I licensed this technology from Amazon, is there a chance that I would get the data and they would also get the data? Would I just get the data? Would they just get the data? Do we know what the agreement would be yet?
Well, I think that's, it's the same negotiation that Amazon has had with Visa. It's
right.
It's going to be up to that individual transaction. I would know for sure that Amazon's going to want as much data as it can get its hands on.
Absolutely. Well, that's what we've got time for the lead. Time now for In Other News. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Mountain. If you could combine the precision targeting of digital advertising with the impact of television commercials, you would have an incredibly effective ad channel. That's exactly what Mountain Performance TV does. Their connected TV software platform allows advertisers to reach their ideal audiences and drive more visits, conversions, and revenue, all from a single intuitive solution that's optimized to deliver performance. Visit mountain.com to learn more. Right, folks, we are back. Today in other news, Visa and Mastercard recently suspended their services in Russia. And how concerned should we be over payments company Klarna's recent losses? Story 1. The US and the EU blocked some Russian banks from the key global financial system SWIFT after Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine. SWIFT, which stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, is responsible for millions of international transactions each day. James Vincent and Russell Brandom of The Verge note a comment from an article from Carnegie Moscow Center think tank in 2021 describing the expulsion from SWIFT as a nuclear option that would hit Russia particularly hard, primarily because the country's reliance on energy exports denominated in US dollars. The cutoff terminates all international transactions. Also, Visa and Mastercard recently suspended their services in Russia. Per the Associated Press, writes Emma Roth of The Verge, cards issued in Russia will no longer work outside the country. She notes any cards issued by banks outside of the country won't work at Russian merchants or ATMs. David, the effect that Russia being blocked from SWIFT and Visa and Mastercard suspending their services in the country will have is blank.
Very significant. Well, I'd first say that, my heart goes out to Ukraine and anyone affected by this tragedy. I was also quite heartened to see Western economies and companies step in and cut Russia off in the manner that they have. Without SWIFT, you have no global commerce. You wouldn't have it. The messaging system that it uses is transmit the information about a transaction that the banks need to send and receive money. So if you're going to ban a bank from SWIFT, it means that bank is cut off from the rest of the world. No message, no money. And there's only 7 banks, to my knowledge, that have been banned, but they comprise a huge chunk of the Russian banking system. And Russia's going to need to seek alternatives. This is going to take time. There are some partnering opportunities, but for now, it's a tremendous blow to the Russian economy. As far as Visa and MasterCard go, I'll just put it this way. Visa has put out getting 4% of its revenue from Russia. That doesn't sound like a lot. That's actually $1 billion a year. Right. So it does certainly demonstrate some resolve. I think, frankly, it's also a practical matter because I think you're planning for the worst. I mean, if sanctions deepen, it becomes harder to do business in Russia, and being able to act earlier allows for a more orderly unwinding of a business that isn't going to impact Visa and MasterCard to be able to operate in other countries or transact elsewhere.
Yeah, Visa and MasterCard, they're responsible for about 75% of all credit cards issued worldwide, according to Statista. And within Europe, Visa and MasterCard respectively have 58% and 41% market share of Europe's global network cards industry per the Nielsen report. That's 99% combined for Visa and MasterCard in terms of cards in Europe. That's noted by Insider Intelligence research analyst Grace Broadbent. So
yeah, and I think what you're going to see in the longer term is this is a part of the bifurcation of East and West. Russia has already developed its own payment network, and it will likely continue to develop it. And in the long term, you're not going to see Visa and MasterCard having an easy time penetrating that market again.
Interesting. Story 2. Payments company Klarna's losses grow as expansion continues, notes a recent Reuters article. Operating losses at the Swedish buy now pay later company widened sharply in 2021 from nearly $200 million to closer to $700 million as it accelerates its global expansion, adding 10 new markets since the start of 2020. David, your level of concern over these growing losses for Klarna is blank.
I'm going to hedge my bets and say it depends.
Okay. How come?
Well, on the one hand, you've got tremendous investment in international expansion. It is paying off in terms of increased payments volume. And these are all good things. But when you have a 400% increase in operating expenses, and you'd factor in the buy now, pay later universe coming under regulatory scrutiny and also facing new competition from the likes of Visa, MasterCard, and the banks, I think that is also potentially a harbinger of lower margin times to come. And I think Klarna, at least in this regard, is very well positioned to make up that ground in its capacity as a super app.
That is all we've got time for. David, thank you so much for hanging out today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yes, sir. Thanks to Victoria. She edits the show, and thanks to everyone listening in. Tune in tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Reimagining Retail, a new marketing podcast made possible by Mountain, where our very own principal analyst covering retail, Andrew Lipsman, will be talking to Todd Hassenfeld of Colgate-Palmolive.